Today, we are going to be unpacking the national average cost of cooking a pot of jollof for a family of 5 in Nigeria, which rose 19.4% to 30,435 naira. In Ghana, so a mild change as the cost of preparing a pot stood at 435 Ghana cedis and 50 pesos in March this year, with the report also highlighting the immediate impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and tensions in the Middle East, making the West African jollof delicacy the most honest ledger of policy failure and household resilience. David Olujinmi, analyst at SBM Intelligence, joins me now to unpack the report. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, David. Let's start off first and foremost before we go into the regional, the country specifics here. What does this Jollof index really reveal when we're looking at the usefulness of food basket indicators as real-time economic distress, should I say, signals compared to the typical inflation report?
So basically how we track the Jollof index is that we go to markets across Nigeria. We have 13 states in the country. We go to the markets and we track the very basic items that people use in cooking jollof rice. Across Nigeria and across Ghana, there is one very consistent meal that makes up what can almost be described as a national meal. Right now in Nigeria is jollof rice, and same thing goes in Ghana. It's a meal that is eaten across board from all the way from Zamfara to Borno to Cross River to Lagos. Whatever part of Nigeria you touch, the food that touches us all, the most consumed staple right now is rice. It's a food item that basically helps us understand this is the direction in which food prices are going in Nigeria. And when you look at the way MBS tracks their data, the food component of the entire inflation basket makes up about 40 to 42%. It's dropped from 51%. So wherever food inflation goes is where national inflation goes. It basically gives us a more on-the-ground assessment of what inflation is seeing in the country.
Wonderful. Now, let's get into the inflation transmission on the back of the Gulf tensions and how this also has played out when we're looking at the regional comparison. We've talked about the Nigerian and Ghanaian market. Now, when we look at the Ghana index, for example, now, they have a much more stable, should I say, FX space.
Yes.
And then what does that reveal when we're looking at exchange rates in relation to food inflation? And then for Nigerian, looking at the markers here and how this also falls below the line compared to Ghana and the sort of nuances we should be taking from there?
So for Ghana and for Nigeria, there's a difference. The most important factor beyond the exchange rate was more on petrol prices. In Nigeria, we have a very direct-to-consumer effect on direct-to-consumer petrol effect. So we saw it immediately the war broke out. We saw it was less than a week, like 2 or 3 days into the war, there was an immediate 40% spike in the prices of petrol in Nigeria. In a country like Ghana, the situation is much different. They have what is called the pricing window, where petrol is priced according to, the government has a pricing window for when petrol prices can be increased. It happens once a month.
And we saw that adjustment in April, and then
Yes.
there's even the announcement for May as well, just to contain the inflation pressure.
So what they now even did in Ghana was they cut down on their fuel taxes. We don't have fuel taxes, but they cut down on their fuel taxes to further cushion the effect of potential petrol price increase on the general population. So they are having a situation where they are trying to temper their inflation rate is around
some sort of subsidy.
Yes, they still have some subsidy. They still have some subsidy measures in place, and they also have an inflation rate that is around 3.6%. I think they are being very watchful of it. In our case, it's much different. We don't have all of those cushion, so we have a very direct to consumer effect on whatever triggers a price increase in Nigeria, whatever triggers a petrol price increase in Nigeria, basically triggers an increase in the immediate quality of lives that people live. That is one thing, but that's the difference between us and Ghana.
And then when we also look at the logistics and supply chain fragility here, look at now, for example, the news from Dangote refinery heightening the cost of ex-depot price of petrol by 75 naira. That's 1,275. And then the pump price would be at about 1,400. So we are getting back to that range of 1.5 expectation. Would you then say Nigeria's food inflation is more of really now a transportation problem rather than an agric problem?
So it's a mix. It's not. It's a balanced thing. when you want to create an economic model to see whether it's a transportation problem or it's an agric problem, you discover that it's more of the two factors play almost an equal role in food inflation. On the agric side, it still links back to the transport side, because transportation arrangements for things like fertilizer, the prices of fertilizer are determined by the logistics used in bringing fertilizers to the farmers. Things as basic as that. So,
irrespective of your production volume, you still have to transport from market,
you still have to transport
from farm
fertilizer.
to market.
Yeah, and there's still also the part of from farm to market. So that part also. So I would say the transportation arrangement also has a significant role. It has a huge significant role because some years ago, research was done and we discovered that the amount of money that for $1 made from agriculture, just about 6 cents goes to the actual farmer who did the farming.
Yes.
So you discover that the remaining 94 cents basically is spread across the transport, the logistics sector, plus the warehousing, the storage, then to the retailers who are going to sell it. So discover that it'll bulk.
Still have with me David Olujinmi, analyst at SBM Intelligence. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, let's talk about household coping mechanisms and then the change we're seeing in market behavior here on the back of the Gulf tensions and how this has ripple effect on energy and food, bringing it to the last mile.
So one thing that we observed was that, through our primary data collection, we observed that a lot of people, there was a resorting to alternatives. So in our data, we always track the price of chicken and turkey. But we discovered that a lot of people have started to cut chicken and turkey out of their meals.
I don't like that.
So it's just, there's something about economics. Economics is, when you want to talk of macroeconomics, it's basically how the environment or how the community reacts to scarce resources in the midst of endless needs.
I would like us to touch more on that, because now you talk about the shift from chicken and beef to, say, for example, crayfish or egg. Egg is even expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
Smoked fish is also quite expensive too.
So the thing here is that you don't, so the reality of it is that people have to eat protein in their meals. Yeah. So when you look at it, you go back in time, you discover that there was a time egg was not a staple meal in the sense. When egg was selling for 10 naira, 20 naira in our country, as at 2014, 15, eggs sold for 20 to 30 naira in Nigeria. So the price has basically 10x. It has gone up by about 1,000%.
David, if we were to look at, from a government perspective now, reacting rather than preparing, what sort of preparedness measures are we missing from a point of government taking action now? So
the sort of measures that are missing are the sort of measures that will protect consumption. My opinion is that consumption has to be protected, because consumption is a major component of what makes up your GDP. When you want to talk of the consumption, investment, government spending, when there is no consumption, there is a drop in government spending, in the sense that government spending is made up of taxes minus the expenditure that government spends. So when people don't, one of the things that we discover that when you track NRS data, you discover that VAT is also a huge component of taxes that the government makes. It powers government revenue a lot. When people don't have the ability to consume as much as they did, when you see this reflected in petrol's consumption between January to March. So petrol's consumption between January to March has fallen. It fell by about 33%. It fell from 60 million liters per day in January to about 40 million liters in March. Why? Because of the spike in the price of petrol.
But David, one of the questions I've also had recurring is that, would you then say Nigeria should adopt some of what Ghana has, possibly a strategic food logistics, or should I say a fuel transport subsidy arrangement for this period?
It's not a popular opinion, especially in the political space, considering how much it has been harped upon that one of the best things that the government has done is the removal of subsidy. But there should be some form of protection measures to ensure that there is no immediate transfer of global shocks, global economic shocks to the Nigerian population. What we have seen is that we are seeing it play out in real time, that whenever global economic shocks are going to come to the world, from whatever part of the world is going to come from, Nigerians have almost zero relationship with Iran. we would have almost zero economic relationship with Venezuela. But we are in a position where whatever goes on in their space is going to have such a significant impact on us, which should not be. We should have some form of protection mechanism.
That insulates our local market.
Yes, so in a way we can have a situation where we'll probably subsidize petrol at the consumption level or subsidize it at the production level. Maybe the government has some form of kickbacks they'll give to refineries to ensure that the gantry price does not step up as high. But the government needs to start looking at ways of protecting consumption in order to help the economy grow, because the economy is essentially dependent on how much people spend.
And for the longest bit, we've talked about chasing inflation, and you cannot necessarily chase inflation and also have growth at a certain momentum, but we'll see how things pan out from here. Thank you, David, for your time. That was David Olujinmi, analyst at SBM Intelligence.